Luke Sweeney is the Vocations Director for the New York Archdiocese, and he's Vice Rector of New York College Seminary. He joins us in studio. Father Luke, as always, thanks for being with us. Pope Francis writing those letters to President Obama and Raul Castro, is this the type of change that was predicted when the Vatican announced its first Latin American Pope?
I think so. The Holy Father definitely believes that where there are problems, where there are issues, people need to speak to one another. You know, if we're in the business of striving to love our neighbor and also love our enemies, we first need to learn to speak to our enemies.
Pope Francis was born Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina. He is the first, as we said, Latin American pontiff. What role did his background play in getting the U.S. and Cuba to the table?
Sure, he brings a lot of credibility to the table because on the one hand, he shares the perspective of so many from Latin America vis-a-vis the United States and of course its dominance in the hemisphere and in the area. But on the other hand, he also knows of life under a totalitarian regime, a dictatorship in the late 70s and the 80s as well. So he knows the suffering that that kind of oppression can wreak. So he brings that with him to the table.
You know, as we mentioned, in 1998, Pope John Paul visited Cuba. That was the first papal visit since 1959, and that is when Fidel Castro took over power. And then in 2012, Pope Benedict visited the island. Have there been other attempts to get the two sides to reconcile? And if so, how close did they come?
You know, there's definitely a papal thread. Pope Francis is his own man, but in a way he's also in the continuity of his predecessors, Pope Benedict, Pope John Paul II. Pope John Paul II had a great line when he celebrated Mass in Havana, where he said, "May the magnificence of Cuba, may you open yourself up to the world," but he also said, "May the world open itself up to you as well." So he kind of clicked with Fidel Castro.
Speaking over the time that led to what we saw this week, there are those on both sides who say that this is either a great deal or the worst thing ever to happen. From a human rights standpoint, will Cuba, the people of Cuba, be better off now that relations between the two countries have been normalized?
It's certainly understandable that people have some issues with what's going on, but you know, dialogue is a good thing, and obviously opening people up to the world, opening people up to others and to better economic possibilities is a good thing. What the Pope is focusing on is the suffering of individuals. So beyond ideology, he's trying to help those that are oppressed in poverty, whether they happen to be in prisons, whether they happen to be in boats coming in from poverty in Africa, or whether it happens to be in Havana.
Think about it. We're already talking about his legacy, and he is so early into his papacy, but has Pope Francis now submitted his legacy as one of the greats?
I mean, certainly he's not going to be and is not passive when it comes to the world stage. When it comes to his legacy, that's certainly for historians to decide years later. But there's never been a pope that's won the Nobel Peace Prize. Perhaps this might be adding to a resume, and who knows, maybe
if he does, we'll have you right back a year from now.
That'd
Father
be
Luke
great.
Sweeney, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Del.
Stephanie.
Del, a Nebraska